Hi, Speaker Cooper here, and I'm super excited to be having many of you join us again for the second week for the Facebook Live tours of the Alberta Legislature building. Last week we were outside and talked a little bit about the outside of the building, and then toured the rotunda together, and I'm so excited to be able to show you some really cool stuff today. I know a number of you had questions last week, and we answered a bunch of those. So at the end of the video, we will take a few more questions. So if you have questions while we're on the tour, go ahead and in the bottom, type them straight in there, and we'll be happy to take those questions and try to answer as many as we can right at the end of the tour. Today what we're going to do is we're going to have a very special treat. We're actually going to go beyond these doors onto the floor of the chamber, and then I have a surprise for you, a space of the legislature that very few people get to see, and in fact few people know that it even exists. So let's step inside the chamber, and let's first, before we start here, what an incredible set of mahogany doors. These doors each took over 100 hours to carve by a master craftsman. Above we have the coat of arms of the province of Alberta, where it says Fortis et Libre, or strong and free, which is our provincial motto, although it didn't become our provincial motto until 1980. So it's a fairly new symbol here in the legislature with respect to just the wonderful chamber that we are so fortunate to have here in the province of Alberta. A couple of things that are interesting. Only 956 people have ever been elected as MLAs here in the province of Alberta, and in order to be on the floor here, you actually have to be an MLA, or there's a couple of other times that it's open to the public, but very, very rarely do you have this sort of opportunity to have an up and close personal view of the chamber floor. As most people that are watching will know, there's often two teams in politics. Sometimes in Canadian politics there's upwards of 5 or 6 parties, but currently in Alberta we have two teams, the government team, and in the context of the Westminster parliamentary system, they're called caucuses. So the government caucus sits on this side. The opposition caucus sits predominantly on this side. So their team sits all right here, led by the leader of the official opposition. Ms. Notley sits right here in this seat, and then directly across from her is where the Premier of the province of Alberta sits, the Honourable Jason Kenney. Interestingly enough, these Westminster chambers, or legislative chambers, are set up in a very traditional manner where both sides face each other, and interestingly enough, they're actually set up at a minimum of 2 sword lengths from each other. And this tradition was set when these system of government initially started. The Sergeant-at-Arms, who sits right back there, his job was actually to keep them separated. And so he, even still today, brings a sword into the chamber. It's a ceremonial sword. But these folks are kept 2 sword lengths apart from each other, so that if there was ever an altercation, the sergeant would be able to jump to his feet and defend the honor of the assembly. The other super cool thing today that we have for the tour and available to you is the Mace. The provincial mace is a symbol of the Queen's power. It is essentially what allows us, or it is the symbol that allows us to govern. This particular mace was a gift to the province of Alberta from the Public Union of Employees on our 50th anniversary. So in 1955, the mace was given to the province of Alberta, and it is a very important symbol here in the Assembly. It is said that the mace has so much power that if you were to touch it with your bare hands, you would for surely die, and that's why when the Sergeant-at-Arms carries the mace into the chamber to start each and every sitting of the Legislative Assembly. You see him wearing a set of white gloves because he is the one that actually has to touch the mace. On the mace, there's such incredible detail. There's many symbols of the province as well as Canada. You can see the very top. It is a beaver, the strong and noble beaver. There's also maple leafs. There is the provincial shield. The royal orb, as it's called, is the top portion of the mace. It's a representation of the crown. And the jewels in our mace actually represent the letters of the province of Alberta. So there is an agate, a labyrinth, a bloodstone, a ruby, a topaz, and so you get this an emerald. So these are a number of the jewels that are located in the mace. Also a set of bison head at the center of the mace is a representation of our Indigenous heritage and the bison that were such an important part of our province. And then hand-carved in the shaft are wild roses as well as sheaths of wheat. It really is an amazing piece of fine art that we have available to us here in the Assembly, and we should be really proud of that. Then you have the table. This is where the table officers sit. These folks are the procedural and legal experts of the Assembly. They help keep us on task. So on this side of the table, you will see parliamentary counsel sit. So this is the folks who advise us on the legal matters of the Assembly. Here in this chair sits the clerk of the Legislative Assembly. Her name is Shannon Dean. She's the 9th clerk of the Legislative Assembly and does an incredible job of overseeing all of the activities inside the chamber. And then on this side, we have another group of experts, procedural experts. They are doing their very best to keep track of all of the records and all of the important things, who speaks, how long they speak, very, very important details that this side of the table manages for us as well during question period and during debate. If we head all the way up to the speaker's dais, of course, this is where my seat is. This is the only spot that the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta is allowed to sit. No other seat in the chamber can the Speaker sit in. So here it is, and all around me there are a number of things that help me do my job. I have a number of different timers, one for question period. Question and answers are each 35 seconds, and it is adhered to quite strictly. And so what I do is I have a 35-second timer, and then I will give the members a hand signal when they only have 5 seconds left to try and encourage them to speed it up. And if they go too long, I'll stand up, and when I stand up, everybody else's microphones are turned off and only the speaker can speak. The other thing that I have is a button switch or a switch here that if I push this button down, it turns off everybody's microphones and they are unable to be heard on Hansard or inside the chamber. It's one of the ways that I have to keep order. I also have timers here that count down the amount of time that a member has left to speak. At each stage of the bill, members are allowed to talk for different periods of times, and so these timers help me make sure that speaking times are allotted fairly here in the chamber. Something else that's kind of neat that not many people will know is here I have what I call our bat phone, or it's an internal phone that allows people to get messages to the speaker, or if there was an emergency. Obviously, it's not very often very used, but this phone lets me speak directly to the Sergeant-at-Arms here in the chamber, or about 6 other offices here in the Assembly, but only directly to those folks. So I have my phone in case I ever need it. And then the other thing that I have here, which is very important, is the reference materials that the speaker uses to help make decisions here in the chamber. So sometimes you'll hear people call points of order. That's when the debate has broken down or people are arguing about certain things. And we have our own rule book, which is called the standing orders. And inside the standing orders, it lays out all the rules that all of us have agreed to. And that's what I actually rule on. But these interesting books, and by interesting, I mean they're interesting for people like me, are the main reference books that we use to base our decisions on. So there's three main ones here in Canada. One's called Beauchesne's Parliamentary Rules and Forms. The other one's called Erskine-May Parliamentary Practice, and much of this is from the Mother Parliament, and then the main one that we use is the House of Commons Procedures and Practice, 3rd edition, 2017. It is a newer book and a great one that we use a lot. So there's lots of really cool things in here as we make our way out. You can see because the government is considered to be the Queen's government, her portrait, and what a magnificent portrait it is of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, long may she reign, is behind the government. And then, interestingly enough, her husband is behind the official opposition. So I think that there might be a joke there about her husband being the opposition to the government, but perhaps we'll leave it at that. So as we head out, we will, I'm going to show you a couple of things, just going to close the door behind us, and then we'll head down and we'll show you some portraits of the premiers, and then we'll also take you up to one more very, very cool spot that not too many people have seen, that is exclusive actually to the speakers. So each premier that has served our province has the opportunity to have a portrait hung here in the legislature. Obviously the late Premier Jim Prentice, we have Premier Hancock, Premier Redford, Premier Stelmach. I think this picture is a great one to just show you a little bit closer. Each premier gets to choose the things that are important to them and then bring them into the portrait. So this particular portrait is painted in the premier's office, which is actually just behind us, but he has chosen to include a picture of his wife, Marie, as well as a Ukrainian Pasenka. Premier Stelmach is from the Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville area and has long and strong Ukrainian heritage, and so he wanted to bring that into his portrait. Of course, the great Ralph Klein, and then just behind here is actually the Premier's office itself. We're not going to be able to go in there, but
hi, Speaker Cooper.
Hey, how are you? So good. We're just in the middle of a live video, but it's good to see you.
You too. My parents are such a big fan of these live videos because they actually get to see where I work. Can I say hi to my mom and dad?
Of course. I mean, we've come this far.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Hope you're well.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, sorry. So then we have Premier Getty and Lougheed and all of the premiers, Premier Strom, Manning, all the way back to the very first premier, and his portrait, of course, is right here, Premier Rutherford. But interesting, there's kind of a neat little tidbit here. The last premier of the Northwest Territories. So before Alberta became its own province, it was part of a larger territory that was called the Northwest Territories, and Premier Haltane was the last premier. I think this is one of the most unique portraits that you will see, particularly because even in 1905, when this portrait would have been painted, it would have been very untypical to have a portrait with someone smoking in it, but he must have been very committed to the cause and has a cigarette here in his portrait, which I think is very, very interesting. That is for sure. Let's head back upstairs. I want to show you one more cool space. I know that we had chatted about the possibility of seeing the Lieutenant Governor's suite last week, but That's not going to be possible this week, so what I thought we'd do is show you an equally as cool spot. Of course, these stairs are very, very fancy and very neat, but we'll just head up one floor. So we're now going to be on the 4th floor of the Alberta Legislature, and this is where the portraits of speakers are actually hung. So just like the premiers have an opportunity to have a portrait, each of the speakers do. So at the far end, Speaker Warner, and then all the way back to the beginning, we have Speaker Carter. I wanted to just show you one particular portrait here. This is Speaker Peter Dawson, and Speaker Dawson is actually the longest serving speaker in Alberta's history. He served from 1937 to 1963. I believe that's 26 years, and just remember that picture because I want to tell you a story about Speaker Dawson right after this. So all across Canada, when legislatures were built, obviously transportation was very, very difficult. And even here in the province of Alberta, we actually only had one sitting that lasted a number of months. And so when they built buildings like this at that time, they often, as in most other Commonwealth places, often would build a residence for the speaker and some other government officials. So this is actually originally was built as a residence for the speaker. Now, it's not a residence at present, but it's still set up like that, and we here now use it mostly for hosting. So the speaker has a responsibility to host lots of dignitaries and particularly ambassadors or consul generals of other nations. And so this is where we often will have a first introductory meeting, and it's really important part of our trade relations and opening up discussions with other jurisdictions. And from time to time, the speaker will have a role to play in that. So we also host a number of meetings here in this in the speaker suite and in this hosting area. It's really a great space and is so neat. And previous speakers even resided here. Now that's not the case any longer, but and there's been a number of very famous guests. But what I would say is, remember I was telling you about Speaker Dawson, longest serving speaker. It is believed that he actually had a heart attack here in the suite and died right inside this bathroom area. Now the official record says that the then health minister attended to him here in the suite and he passed away on the way to the hospital. But many people believe that he actually passed away here in the suite. You can see 100-plus-year-old tub in the bathroom. It's quite a neat facility here that we still get to use for hosting dignitaries or other functions here inside the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. So this just about wraps up the tour for today. I'm so excited to see you next week again when we're going to take you high above the legislature floor to the palm room and the bell tower way up. If you look way up, I'm not sure that you'll be able to see today. And I'm not sure if we have any questions, but I'm happy to take a few questions if that's so inclined. I also know that we have gone a little bit longer than we did last week, and so really hope that you're enjoying these. Feel free to reach out to me or my office if there's a particular thing here inside the assembly that you might like to view, or a story that you've heard that you would like to have some more information on. I know that we're also keen to get to the library so that we can show you the 50-year-old hamburger. I know that was a request from some folks last week as well. So thank you so much for joining us here on our Facebook Live today. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Have an awesome week, and look forward to seeing you next week when we go high above the rotunda in the Legislature Palm Room.